Welcome, dear listeners, to another bone-chilling episode of Unveiling Nightmares. I'm your host, C.A. Bainham, and today we have a special guest with us. Guest today is none other than Justin Hamelin, author of Apprehension, a collection of nightmares. So, hi, and thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Really excited to be here and to talk with you.
That's brilliant. So tell me a little about yourself, Justin.
Well, my name is Justin Hamelin. I was born and raised in Waukegan, Illinois, which was the hometown of Ray Bradbury. So certainly took some great inspiration young in life with that kind of creative energy going on in my hometown. Currently, I live a little southwest of Waukegan now with my wonderful fiance and our excellent sons, and I'm still writing spooky stories and watching as much as I can. And yeah, I work customer service during the day, and by night I kind of let out all the emotional trauma from the workday into my writing.
Completely understand the customer service there.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about your books.
Sure. So Apprehension is a collection of 5 short stories, kind of my love letter to the genre that I grew up with, sometimes introduced to a little too young, but, I came out okay. So there's a lot of respect and acknowledgement to the Twilight Zone series, little bit of Goosebumps love, and certainly, the Stephen King and Edgar Allan Poe vein that's kind of been beating it within my heart since I could read, or was old enough to get my hands on my mother's copies. Yeah. So yeah, it's a collection of 5 short stories that kind of deal with everything from psychological distress to something I really had fun with, and kind of I think we can all relate to, is kind of meeting fate, or meeting kind of the ultimate boogeyman, which is mortality face to face. Yeah.
Brilliant. So who or what are your biggest influences on your work, especially when it comes to creating such dark, unsettling narratives?
Sure. The biggest one, I'm fascinated with what Rod Serling did with the Twilight Zone series. And I think as I get older, and I think as any fan of any genre kind of gets older, you start to understand the nuances much better because you've lived them, or you can relate to them on a personal level. And I look back and, you see what Rod Serling was trying to do, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, even, with the Twilight Zone, when it comes to just the world we're living in. And, we've only got one of them. So as far as we know at this time, so, things like, equality and just treating each other right, and, not being afraid of someone who may be a bit different, or again, kind of as a father, I can certainly relate to the idea of, just wanting to raise good human beings and wanting to set a good example. So Rod Serling was a big one, and continues to be. Stephen King, of course. I think the product he's put out for 50 years, the rich kind of American landscape that he's painted onto just a library of incredible stories and nightmares. You can't be overvalued. Yeah. And Shirley Jackson is another big one. I think just kind of, as I've gotten older, fallen into a great respect for, again, just mortality, and not being afraid of death, but just understanding that I think we all want to leave an impression when all is said and done. And sometimes we have to kind of fight the good fight, and whether it's breaking through personal trauma or generational familial habits, those are habits that die hard, and it can really cause quite a distressing nightmare on the people involved and the readers who are reading it.
Yeah, that's right. So can you share some insights into your creative process and any rituals that you follow to give you life to your nightmares?
Oh, sure. The biggest one for me is I'm a chronic note taker. I always have either a folded up piece of paper in my pocket with a pen. My passenger seat always has either a small steno pad or a notebook with a pen in the cup holder, just in case, I get some of the craziest ideas that kind of turn into the most vibrant stories sitting at a red light or waiting for a freight train to pass. And I like the idea of always kind of keeping that tap open. I'm always, it's a bit of a cliche, but, writers, you can come up with ideas anywhere and you never really know when inspiration will strike. So I think it's important to have that notebook at the ready. And sure, most of it ends up being chicken scratch, gobbledygook, but every once in a while, there's a good one that I can go back to and really flesh out into a story that I enjoy. And I think that's the biggest part, is just finding that inspiration and then putting a story to it that you can be proud of.
Brilliant. So crafting horror and extreme horror narratives can be an intensive journey, as you probably know. So what challenges have you faced in this genre, and how do you overcome them to create the chilling and unsettling experiences that your readers crave?
Sure. Yeah. A big challenge for me personally, and I don't think enough writers really give it the respect it's kind of due, is I can fall into some pretty brutal writer's blocks. And it's one of those things where, try as I may, if I'm dealing with one, it's like pulling on a door that you're supposed to push through. And, it's easier said than done to just say, take a deep breath and just try to get something out. But when it's as bad as it has been from time to time in my past, it's just better to kind of respect it. It's kind of the lion in the room. I take a step back. I sit in my corner politely and let the big baddie kind of loosen up. And, I'm always writing, always brainstorming. But, that writer's block can be a real thorn in the side. And, it can get depressing and disappointing. I know I had at one point in my life, I didn't write for about 14 months just because I couldn't get anything down that even resembled a story that I was proud of. And, but eventually I was able to get through it. And I had, again, like 2 notebooks worth of random ideas, some more bonkers than others. And I was able to put together a few stories and kind of work my way back in. But I think that's a big one, is writer's block. And then another one is just, most authors will always say, write for yourself, and there's no such thing as taboos, and there's no such thing as worrying about what other people say or think. But in reality, we all kind of want to be acknowledged as, or taken seriously with this craft. And, I look sometimes and, there's certain people I know, maybe I don't tell you what the story's about because I know it's not really up your alley. And, so it sometimes it's hard to find a supportive throughway through that, whether it's a friend or a family member or just someone who you trust their opinion with. And that's not saying anything against anyone in particular, certainly not my personal life. My fiance especially has heard more nightmares and weird twisted things, and I'm just wonderfully blessed to still have her waking up next to me each morning. But it could be tough, because I think, try as I may, there are some taboos that I'm not comfortable writing for or writing about.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's topics that, you're not going to really make everyone overly pleased with. And I do have one of those in this latest collection, Apprehension, called Milk Teeth, which is my kind of twisted take on the Tooth Fairy. And when I start that pitch, that elevator pitch to people, their eyes kind of light up and they get excited. And I have had a few people read it, and the ending is particularly gory. And, it's turned off a few people, and I've noticed it because they're telling me their thoughts on each story. And then you get to that one and you could just kind of see the light in her eyes dim just a little bit. And, I can't help but kind of smirk and say, well, I warned you, it was not going to be pleasant. So, there are some stigmas and taboos that you have to cross, but I think everything can be done with at least a bit of dignity. And that as long as it's necessary or vital to the story, I think people who truly respect the craft can relay those even terrible or horrifying storylines.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there's a bit of misunderstanding as well between horror and extreme horror. I don't think many of the readers who haven't read extreme horror before, they don't really understand what that entails. So I do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do get a little bit confused when they start seeing all the gory stuff in there that's not normally in their normal horror.
Sure. I mean, there's certainly a difference between, reading a Shirley Jackson or a Richard Matheson and then immediately picking up say Clive Barker, and there's a big difference, and that really can turn off some people, but that's no fault of the author.
Yeah, that's right. So can you provide us with some insights into the reactions and experience of your readers? Are there any memorable reactions that you've had at all?
Well, I can say I am the proud purveyor of my first nightmare. I had a reader message me a few days ago, and she said that Milk Teeth actually, she said I read it right before bed. I woke up in a cold sweat. She's like, and I couldn't help. There's a bit of a spoiler here. She's like, but I had this terrible dream that a child was following me and couldn't talk. And I'll leave it at that because of what the Tooth Fairy had done to him. Yeah. But she said, just that idea and waking up in the dark. And she's like, I looked around the room and, I couldn't quite decipher the shadows. She's like, you ruined my night of sleep last night. And I appreciate that. And I was just beaming, and I couldn't help but message her and thank her for her wonderful story and apologize for the nightmare. But that was a particularly wonderful one. And then my fiance's parents, who are readers, but I wasn't quite sure what they'd think about my stories, so I didn't aggressively pursue getting them as readers. But they showed up to a recent reading and told me that they had read the stories and were quite impressed. And that meant a lot to me because those two in particular are you'd consider them in-laws, but I see them as parents and people that I really strive to make proud of me. Yeah. And so that meant a lot to me. So there's been some really positive feedback. And I've also loved the people who I've had a few people say like, that's, no, it wasn't really my thing, and I asked for feedback just for the sake of, well, was it the story or was it, was I just kind of working on a different wavelength that you weren't expecting? And typically it's, well, I didn't think it would be that gory, or I didn't think it would be that dark. And it's like, okay, I could deal with that, but I love the feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm always trying to get as much feedback as possible.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's where the misunderstanding comes in, isn't it, between horror and extreme?
Certainly. I think with extreme in particular, I mean, you're dealing with kind of you could deal with the same quote unquote scary ideas, but there's just such a deeper, darker element of whether it's the body horror or the trauma or just the detail in which the story, and in particular the horror, is crafted. It's a very very tough thing to deal with if you're not expecting it. And that's why I think it's really important. And I think there's a lot of wonderful authors out there who make no qualms with saying, like, this is a very dark, upsetting story. It's not going to be for everyone, but, it does have an audience. And I think that's important to acknowledge and respect those stories because they do have audiences and they are stories that need to be told.
That's right. I mean, definitely. So can you tease any upcoming projects or work in progress and share any vision for the evolution of this genre?
Certainly. I am working through my first novel. It's called Our Shadows, They Breathe. It's about a young man who very early in life realizes he can do something. He can't quite put it into words, and he doesn't quite know what it is. And in reality, what it is he's a bit of a psychopomp, which is in Greek mythology, it's what Hermes was, and even some of the characters from the underworld, such as the ferryman from Styx. And what he can do is he can kind of take people right before death to, quote unquote, their happy place. And he uses this skill for good, of course. He's able to reconnect you with a loved one, or just give you the best, kind of the greatest hits of your favorite memories in your life. And of course, when there's good, especially at that level of spirituality and supernatural potential, there's got to be bad. And he ends up ultimately meeting somebody who also doesn't understand the full power of his skills, but is handling things far worse and offering a far more dark and dangerous option to that kind of quote unquote ride. So I'm working on that. And I've also got another short story collection with a couple of different stories. One in particular that I'm really excited about is called A Whisper of Fallen Leaves. And it's a fun little dive into the world of witchcraft, and kind of in an urban setting, which, again, coming from Waukegan, it's definitely a city with a population of about 120,000. And I've always liked that idea of one person being terribly haunted in a city. You know, the idea that there's always somebody around, but in reality, there's nobody around. So I love that idea and kind of playing with that paranoia. So yeah, we're hoping to have a busy 2024.
Brilliant. Well, I'll be looking forward to seeing those out.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Justin, for taking part and taking the time out to be on the show. It's been amazing having you here. So thank you once again.
Oh, I can't thank you enough. You're doing a wonderful thing, and really, really appreciate it. I know independent authors are always looking for options and opportunities to speak and to share their stories, and I cannot thank you enough. So thank you.
No, you're very welcome. And I completely understand with it. I mean, being an author myself, I completely understand
Sure.
how hard it is to get out there these days. But thank you very much for coming on the show. Stay tuned, dear listeners, for more spine-tingling tales and dark discussions in a world of extreme horror. Until next time, remember the nightmares are real, and here on Unveiling Nightmares, we're crafting nightmares one tale at a time.